So, if you're in this space, entrepreneurship, startups, that kind of thing, passive income streams, you've probably heard about the book Millionaire Fast Lane, and I actually just finished reading it. Um, you know, let's be honest, it gets some things wrong. I'm going to do a more fulsome video on the topic, but yeah, the book definitely gets some things wrong. And we're going to go into those first because I think they're very important things to think about. Number two, though, the book is actually pretty good. It has a lot of very high value content and also very refreshingly, while it does recycle some content, it doesn't recycle nearly as much content as a lot of books in this space do. So, for that reason alone, I actually think it is a good book to read, just because you are going to get some unique thoughts and spins on things. Basically, what the Millionaire Fast Lane is it is a proposed system by which you can create a company, 6 years later, sell it for $10 million. And the theory is that you could do that with a 16% probability of success. And that right there is really like the biggest flaw in the book, is that one of the benefits of it is it kind of goes and it illustrates to you why being on the slow lane, which is kind of being a good little boy, going to college, getting the degrees, having good jobs, jobs that your mother would like you to have, right? Kind of goes to show you why that's pretty dumb. And it's actually a lot more risky. And while business is inherently risky because your business could go to zero, um, having a job is kind of the same way. You can lose your job, and if you don't have any savings, and then your net worth could very quickly go to zero. So, it does a very good job illustrating that. It also does a very good job of getting people off what the book calls the sidewalk, which is basically people who just live paycheck to paycheck and they forego all future benefit for, present pleasures. So, the book has some good points. What does the book get wrong? Number one, the book vastly overestimates the probability of success of being a startup founder. And it is specific to startups because what the book teaches you essentially is, and it's a good point, it's basically teaching you so basically going from the sidewalk to the slow lane is going from flat thinking to positive linear thinking. And then going from the slow lane to the fast lane is going from positive linear thinking to exponential thinking. And so that's actually a very good framework. The problem is that exponentially growing businesses are actually a historical anomaly, with the exception pretty much of real estate. Like, it's really only with the vast efficiencies of distribution that are made available to us in the modern day with all of our technologies, including the internet, that kind of exponential growth over a 6-year period is even possible. And I'm not saying that just because it wasn't done historically, that means it can't be done today. Obviously, there are tons of people doing it today. But I think when you consider how old the book is and what people are doing now, it's a much more crowded space than it used to be. That's number one. Number two, just in general, the book definitely overestimates the probability of success. So it says that, like, if you're on the Millionaire Fast Lane, it gives you a 16% probability of success. Obviously, that number is illustrative, but let's not kid ourselves. It's really more like a 1 to 5% chance, if that. It's probably closer to 1%. If you consider that 80% of all businesses fail, and also if you consider that the author talks a lot about his own failures, he says you also need to get used to failing, right? If you're estimating like 15% probability of success, I'm not going to do the math in my head, but basically you should expect, 5, 6, 7 failures before you get one success. Are you giving up, basically 6 years per attempt? If you're giving up 6 years per attempt, and you have to do 6 failures in order to get to be successful, that's 36 years. That's basically working for nothing for 36 years versus having a job. And that's another thing. So number one, number two, really number three, because number one, the startup space is highly saturated in the present day. Number two, the book vastly overestimates your probability of success getting a startup to a successful $10 million exit. Number three, the book vastly underestimates the earning potential of somebody who's on the slow lane, right? Like traditional employment. And number four, the book, well, to be honest, the book is actually pretty realistic about savings rates for the average person. But that's kind of a fallacy in and of itself, because the book is all about adopting unusual mindsets in order to break free of the paradigm that traps people. And so, the book presumes that you're going to go out there and be able to make all these entrepreneurial moves, really reinvent your life, see the world in a different way, all these things. But the book never, goes so far as to assume that you earning a six-figure salary would save more than 10% of your income. So obviously, and look, here's the thing. I will say this is one good thing about the book, is that it gives people like me a real kick in the ass, because it points out a lot of flaws in the slow lane approach. And what I will say is I'm somebody who has maxed the slow lane approach, because like I have made the slow lane as fast as possible. I'm earning like top 1% income for my age. I'm definitely earning, far in excess of 10% overall across the entire United States. I'm earning over 10% right out of college. And at the same time, my savings rate is in excess of 50%. And so when you have all those things going in your favor, obviously you can make the slow lane a lot faster. That being said, though, I guess the question is this, is it more likely you're going to be able to max the slow lane, or is it more likely that you're going to be able to win on the fast lane? And that's actually a very interesting question. And I actually ran some very, illustrative numbers behind it, not numbers that are serious enough to actually, swear by. But I will say it's actually if you're in my position, it's kind of equivalent. If you do a discounted cash flow analysis, basically, of both options, then the steady employment thing on a present value basis is actually the same. Now, what I will say is that there is another point of the book that it makes that is really good, and it talks a lot about lifestyle and the value of your time. And that is the kick in the ass that somebody who's doing the slow lane approach needs. Because essentially, if you're a slow laner like myself, frankly, and kind of like all my family members, you really value money more than time. And the book does a really good job of just dissecting that and pointing out how dumb that actually is, and how the trade-off really doesn't make sense. And so I think that's really good. The only issue I will say is that, number one, I think the book does a very good job of illustrating the value of time. However, I still think that for all, the hate the book basically puts on what it calls money chasers, people who are really just motivated for the money, I think there is kind of this fallacy as well with the analysis of the fast lane, because ultimately the book is about making money. And number two, the big fallacy is that, one of the benefits of being a maxed out slow laner is that you can have your income rise linearly while your expenses remain flat or even decrease linearly, right? The advantage of the fast lane is that your income can increase exponentially, and the author presumes that your expenses will increase linearly. The issue is that a lot of people with exponentially increasing incomes also have exponentially increasing expenses. And so, that's actually an issue. And the reason why that's an issue is basically because it presumes essentially that the Millionaire Fast Lane person is going to put a huge premium on their time versus money. And they're going to be willing to sacrifice potential expenditure. The issue with that is that for the same, I honestly think 1% chance that you're going to be successful with the fast lane approach, um, you know, that same 1% chance you would be able to get yourself a top 1% income as an employee and essentially adopt a very similar strategy. Now, your growth potential might be lower, but your probability is going to be higher. So in the end, it kind of washes out. Um, however, I will say this, I definitely am drawn to the fast lane approach, right? Like I have plenty of money. I'm on track. I will probably become a millionaire. I mean, yeah, I would certainly become a millionaire faster doing the slow lane approach than pivoting to the fast lane approach. That being said, what the book really emphasizes is control. This is a book, and I kind of talked about this in a previous video. I'm not sure if that one's still published or not, but basically, there are two kinds of people in my mind, and there are more, but these are the two main kinds of people. There are people who are motivated to seek pleasure, and there are people who are motivated to seek freedom. And so this book is really for people who are motivated to seek freedom, and they're willing to give up the pleasure. And, as I mentioned, he kind of doesn't treat the fast lane and the slow lane fairly because he kind of assumes that the slow laner, it's kind of weird. He kind of assumes that the slow laner is motivated to seek freedom, but not enough to really save super hard. And then he kind of assumes that the fast laner is like almost totally motivated by freedom as like reflected in their spending habits, not keeping up with the rapid pace of their income. But at the same time, though, like the book talks a lot about lavish lifestyles, etc., etc. The only difference is that, so basically the way the author characterizes it, you're going to have to defer your pleasure. The question is, do you defer your pleasure for 6 years or do you defer your pleasure for 30 to 40 years? And the question there is really like, would you rather gamble on being able to enjoy like a 1% chance that you'll be able to gamble, and achieve some, 6-year timeline to exit? Or would you rather gamble essentially, if you're a top 1% income earner, that you're essentially going to have a guaranteed path to maybe not $10 million, but I mean, at least $1 million, $2 million probably, if you work like a full 30 years or something like that. So anyway, these are just some initial thoughts, and I'm definitely going to, break this down more analytically. I literally just finished reading the book. Just had a couple of thoughts. I do think the book is actually very good, especially if you haven't read a lot of content in this space before. I do think it's actually quite valuable. Obviously, there are some flaws with it, but it's good. It's good frameworks to think about, and I'm sure I'm going to layer in more of the concepts, from that book into this channel. I will shamelessly repurpose prior information, just like anyone in this space shamelessly repurposes information. But yeah, so great book. I would say probably honestly an 8 out of 10 for its category. I think, it definitely sells you a little bit on the lifestyle. I think also another thing that's kind of an issue with anything in this space is a lot of these books are kind of only helpful if you have an idea that's highly scalable, but it doesn't actually help you get the idea that is highly scalable. And so I think that's kind of one of the issues with startups as a business model. One of the things lifestyle businesses have that startups don't is a very short path to profitability, and you don't need to have a crazy idea. His view on that is that you can just take an existing product and improve it and then sell it better than anyone else. Yeah, technically that could work. The only question is number one, are you able to actually sell it better? And are you able to sell it better and charge a high enough price that, your ability to sell it better will actually be, profitable, because you're able to upcharge it more than the cost of actually pushing the units harder or better or whatever the case may be to sell more. So that's kind of a tricky calculus, and I think inherently the margins there are going to be lower. The book's really, really what the book is for people who, have like internet-based startup company ideas. And, he's thinking like, he really pushes more of a consumer-centric angle. Like he's like, you need to impact millions of people. And then he always kind of caveats that as like, or you can impact a few people with massive value proposition. That's kind of for like the B2B SaaS people in the crowd. But it's really like a consumer, massive scale startup. That's really what the book is trying to encourage you to do. And that's probably because that's what the author did, and it worked for him. Back then, in those days, it was certainly very different than it is now, in terms of like the competition and startup landscape and all that stuff. So, but yeah, I would say overall it's a very good book. Definitely worth a read, especially because, it's not that expensive. I think it's really good if you're just starting out. I think the first half of the book is definitely not as valuable as the back half. Might have said that already, but I would skim through his like autobiographical stuff. So that kind of content is actually very important for some people. Like some people need that kind of introduction. Their brain is wired a little differently than maybe mine is. So it's totally fine to include that. And honestly, it's probably better to do it that way. Storytelling and all. But anyway, so let's see. Do I have any other final thoughts on the book? I think I was going to say, like, with lifestyle businesses, yeah, shorter path to profitability. You can literally just like do what someone else is doing in another market pretty much exactly. And then the idea too is, it's actually like, so basically as long as the unit and then like profit margin, like calculus works, like you're selling enough units at a certain profit margin in order to like basically make the returns you want. Number one, you can certainly, this just popped in my head as well. Another issue with it is like his whole model revolves predominantly around being able to cash out and sell. And then what he does is like, once you sell your business, you go into passive investments, and then you just like skim yield off of like debt securities. Totally fine. But number one, I will say that you're reliant on, like, one thing that's not in your control, because this book's a lot about control, is basically that there's going to be a buyer. There certainly might not be a buyer, right? I mean, that's definitely something that you might not have. Number two, another thing with that is like, depending on what interest rates are, you might not be able to actually generate a very significant yield. Obviously, if you sell a business for $10 million, you're going to be able to generate enough yield regardless of what you do. But the question is, can you really do that? And number three, this is something actually Alex Hormozy talks about, which I think is a very good point. Basically what happens is once you sell a business, you're exposed to interest rate or, reinvestment risk, essentially, where, if your business was yielding, let's say 10% return per year, if you cash out and all your available options are for generating cash flow are like 5 to 6% per year. Well, that's actually not very good on a cash flow basis. Like, you can de-risk the money, right? So that is a benefit of it. But if you're just thinking about it from a cash flow basis on like a lifestyle basis, then actually like staying in the business might be better. The problem with startups at that massive scale is like, definitely you can't really maintain a very good lifestyle, generally speaking, while you're active in the business. And that's why the Millionaire Fast Lane is all about lifestyle, but it's about lifestyle once you exit the business. If you're still in the business and you're doing one of these, startups that's scaling massively, you typically don't tend to have an incredible amount of freedom. You certainly can. It just depends on like a lot of things. That is one other nuance though. A lifestyle business, a small business, you know, let's say you cap out at like at max potential earnings is like 200 grand a year. I think most people would find that okay. And, you know, if I just think about like 200 grand a year growing at 3%, let's say your discount rate is 7. So 4, probably going to do the math wrong on this. So I'm not even going to try. But the point is like 200. Well, no, I kind of want to do the math. Nah, never mind. I don't want to say the wrong number and then have the comments be like, "Oh, this guy is stupid." Anyway, so basically, the point is that's worth a ton of money. Like something that yields, you know, well, okay. Okay, let me think about it. I'm going to think about it. I want an actual number. Okay, so 200 basically divided by 4%. I can do this. I can do this. So 4%, that's basically 2 on 50. That's basically 1 on 25. So it's 25 times 200. There's 5 200s in a million. So that's 5 million. So it's worth $5 million. So basically, if you can generate a business that is like just giving you $200,000 a year and it's growing at 3%, basically inflation, and you know your discount rate is 7% because that's what you could probably expect to return on the S&P 500 if you're optimistic. And then, you know, I'm basically just doing the perpetuity growth model. The point is that business is worth quite a bit, and if you can actually do that with less work and less risk, that might be the way to go. Anyway, I'm gonna think about it. It's a great book. Apologies for the random math there at the end. Mental math has never been my strong suit, especially when you have a camera in your face, but anyway, so those are just some thoughts. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want more super valuable book reviews like this one. I will make a more polished, well thought out video shortly.